Welcome to this demo of a little app to display connections between publications, scientific publications, and objects in collections, such as museum specimens or herbarium shoots. So if you're watching this, you probably know quite a bit about persistent identifiers already. But let's just sort of give it a quick little background, mainly because this will help understand why I've adopted the particular approach that you're going to see. So a persistent identifier that we're probably all quite familiar with is the DOI, Digital Object Identifier. You'll see this on most of the modern academic papers, both for the article itself, and if you look at the list of literature cited, most of those papers will have their own DOI. So this gives us a number of things. So if you're reading a paper, you can very quickly drill down to the subject in a bit more detail by clicking on those DOIs and looking for references. And it gives you a sense of the source of information that paper is using, whether it be other publications or indeed data sets. Likewise, it enables metrics. So if you want to know how important a paper is in some sense, then you can cite how many times it's been cited. So you get provenance and you get metrics. What's also happened is that because we have these persistent identifiers for these articles, third parties have come along and built services on top of that. And one that probably many of us have seen is the metric donut. This color-coded symbol giving us some indication of how many times this paper has been mentioned, for example, on Twitter or on Facebook, how many people have bookmarked it or blogged about it. So in the context of this project, you can imagine that if you have a natural history collection full of all these wonderful specimens, you'd like to know what have people done with them, what research has been based on that, both to find out more about the specimen, perhaps to update the information that you have, and also potentially as a measure of impact, the importance of that collection. So in order to do this, we'd need a bunch of things. We need to have persistent identifiers for specimens. And in the natural history community, particularly within Europe, this is starting to happen. Many of the major collections now have persistent identifiers for individual objects. We'd want an identifier for the paper, the publication that talks about the specimen, and we have that already seen with DOIs. And the third thing is we need some sort of gluing statement that connects the two together. Now, we don't really have much of that, but imagine we did. How would we make use of that? So I guess the question is, if we have those connections, what can we do with them? And one approach would be, I guess, to negotiate with academic publishers about displaying this information on their web pages for each article, and also then we'd have to talk to everybody who runs a museum or collection website to get them to do the same and show the connections to the literature. And that's a lot of work, and we don't actually have anything to show at the moment, so why would people even do that? So one approach is to basically follow what Altmetric did. And when they started out, before they convinced many publishers to display their donuts, is they came up with this thing called a Bookmarklet, which you can basically see. I've got one up here, which is a little button you can add to your web browser. You click on that, and it shows the donut wheel for a particular paper. So the approach I'm going to show you now is, let's do the same thing for collections. So I've got a little demo, which basically you get a bookmarklet called Annotate It. It's not very exciting, but that's what it does. And I've got a few web pages where I know that there are these specimens linked to these publications. I have a database that has that. But I'm going to show you that without having to do anything to those web pages themselves, we can show these things. So if you want to do this yourself, all you have to do is grab this little link here. So you sort of click and drag, stick that up on your browser bookmark bar. There it is. And then away we go. So I've got some examples down here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a paper. It's got a cool title, Why the Long Face? Okay, so this is a paper that's been published in PLOS. And here it is here, and it's got all the usual bits and pieces that go with a modern article, title there, obviously. Here's the DOI of the paper, all the information, We've got tweets about it. Now, PLOS doesn't use Altmetric, but you can still get an Altmetric donut if you want using their Bookmarklet. So here it's up here. I'm going to click on that. And you can say, oh, well, okay, this paper's clearly attracted quite a bit of attention. So what I decided to do is let's do the same for collection objects. So in this case, there are a number of specimens this paper is used. And to show those, I click on Annotate it. It gives you a list of some of the specimens it knows about. So basically, this little pop-up is saying, okay, there is the paper that we're looking at, and these are some of the specimens or specimens that it knows about. And if there's a picture of the specimens in the museum database, it shows those as well. So there's some cool pictures there. Now, each one of these has a link, and that link is the identifier of that specimen. So let's click on this one. So now we're off to the Natural History Museum in London, and this is their data portal, and this is the web page for that specimen, that caiman we saw used in the paper. And it's a classic museum web page. Everything's sort of structured as a bit of a data dump. We've got some nice pictures. We've got a persistent URL down here, and there it is. Now, there's nothing on this web page that says this specimen's kind of interesting because it's been used in this PLOS paper. There's no connection between those two. And you can imagine it'd be kind of nice to show that this is actually, not only is it kind of pretty, but it's been really useful. So we click on Annotate it, and it says, hey, I know about this specimen, and it's been mentioned in this paper here, which is the PLOS one that we just looked at. So click on that, and we're back to the long face paper, which used that specimen. Okay, a couple more examples. Let's switch to plants. This is a paper. It's a paper on taxonomy of begonia, the plant. It's published by the Edinburgh Journal of Botany. It's behind a paywall, so we can't really read it unless we are so excited about begonias we're going to stump up £25. But we do know that this paper mentions some specimens, and we can have a look. So here are some of the plant specimens that are used in this paper. And there are pictures of these. Again, these come from the different museums. The two ones down the bottom, that's from the Natural History Museum in London. The one at the top is the Royal Botanic Gardens in Edinburgh. So again, the link is the identifier. Let's go and click on that. So now we're off to the Botanic Gardens in Edinburgh. And this is their database page for that plant specimen. Again, a bit of a data dump, link to the picture. And again, there's nothing on this web page saying, hey, there's been some research done on this specimen. It's been talked about, it's been cited. We click on Annotate, and it says, hey, I know about this, and that's the paper we just looked at. Okay, final example. We're going to go slightly international now. So, so far we've looked at UK museums. This is a paper, again, another journal, European Journal of Taxonomy. Modern paper has a DOI, etc. Oops. Okay, so what do we know about this? Well, it includes at least this specimen, and this specimen is housed in an institution in Belgium. So let's go and have a look at that. So again, another completely different looking museum webpage, different kind of design, nice little funky map. There's a picture of the specimen, here's some details. And again, there's nothing on this web page that gives any indication that the specimen has been used to do some research. It's just, there's the specimen. So we click on this button and it says, okay, this page is on this specimen, and there's a couple of things which link to it. Now, one is the paper we've just seen. The other link here is rather cryptically entitled page 3. So let's go have a look at that. This takes us to the Biodiversity Heritage Library. If you haven't come across this, this is a wonderful project. It involves scanning millions of pages of biodiversity literature from the 21st century, from today, going right back 2 or 3 centuries, millions of pages, all open access and freely available. And in this case, this is a scan of the article that we've been talking about in the European Journal of Taxonomy. Now, something like this presents actually a bit of a challenge because you can sort of scroll through and look at different pages. So we'll see what we can make of that. Here's a little annotated bookmarklet. It knows it's looking at this web page in VHL. And you might just notice that if you scroll through different pages, the page number there changes. So it knows which page you're looking at. And if we scroll through page 3, it says, hey, did you know there's a specimen in a collection that's one in Brussels that's mentioned on this page? And there we are. So what those examples I hope show is that we can display this information on these web pages. So what's been did and what's been hid, the key thing is the bookmarklet doesn't do anything to the web pages in the sense that we don't have to convince people publishing articles online or in charge of a museum and their web pages to do anything at this stage. The bookmarklet does it all for you. All the bookmarklet needs to know is what page are you looking at and have access to a database that says this specimen is mentioned in this paper. And so then you can start to demonstrate the connection between these collection objects and the scientific literature in a very kind of simple, interactive kind of way. Under the hood, I won't bore you with the details, but there's a bit of JavaScript which reads the web page and figures out what the web page is, what the identifiers are, goes and talks to the database and pulls that information back and displays it to you. It all happens live. Each example that you saw is running live. It's not kind of pre-canned. Okay, you may have questions about this. There's a couple of questions that I guess that I have. I mean, firstly, is this useful? Does it seem useful approach, certainly at the start, to try and show the potential value for connecting collection objects to publications about those objects? How do we scale this up? There are lots of institutions that have identifiers. Relatively speaking, there's clearly many that don't, but people are making a start on it. So how do we sort of scale up and make those connections? And also, I focused on natural history collections because that's my background, but clearly this can just be generalized beyond that. And if you're curious about the underlying code, there's a link down the bottom to get help. Thanks for your time.